So the next part of creating my bias tape is sewing these strips together in a way that I am connecting them actually on the bias on the seam, as well as lining up my stripes. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take my two longest. I always kind of work longest to shortest because I would rather work with a piece that has fewer seams. So my shortest is over there. And so I have these two pieces. When I sew my bias tape, I can't just lay them together like this and sew right here or sew a straight seam. If I sew a straight seam, it's actually interrupting all of the bias. So my fabric will stretch until it gets to the seam, which is on the straight grain, and then it'll lock up. So it'll completely disrupt the entire point of this really like supple, stretchy material. Think about the bias as being elastic and the straight grain as being not, okay? And so I can't, you know, line up these edges together like this. And so that is still not on the bias, right? Because it's not on the bias of both pieces. So that won't work either. What I am going to do is I'm going to create a square with, or think of it as a square or a box with my strips of fabric. And I'm going to flip, to actually demonstrate what I just did. So I'm overlapping these so that both strips have a complete square, okay? My sewing technique is going to be stitching from the top left down to the bottom right. So literally like on this diagonal, on this stripe. What that is going to do is create a seam on the bias for both pieces so that when it opens up, it'll be continuous. Obviously, my stripes are interrupted at that pattern. So what I'm going to do is flip my piece over and try it from the opposite side of my woven fabric. So now when I line these up to form a square, top left to bottom right, I'm going to line up my finger just like that and check it. And now we see that the stripes are continuing in the same direction. So I know that's right now. I am going to lay my piece back down and pin into my fabric on that diagonal, just to hold it in place and remind myself that's exactly where I'm sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my machine on. And then adjust my strip so that top left, bottom right, I'm sewing in that direction. Stitching and back stitching at the beginning and end of this very short seam. I'm going to remove my pin. Okay, just like so. I'll pull it away. And now, when I open it up, you can double check it. My stripes are continuous. Do they line up perfectly? No, that's okay. But the point is that they're all in the same direction. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim this down to 1/4 of an inch. Okay, and then I can line up my next piece. So now I have a seam, right? And I'll connect my next and shortest piece. So let's try it this way. Nope, that's contrast again. Here we go. So just flipping it over works great. And then again, the technique is top left to bottom right, making sure that my selvage isn't in there. Remember, you don't want to include the selvage because the way the selvage is woven, the selvage itself is non-stretch. So don't include that as part of your fabric. So top left, bottom right. Just like so. That looks great. Now I'll trim this away. Remember, always let your scissors rest on the table, just to give you more stability. Okay, all right. So now I am ready to press my material. To create the bias tape, You can press it many different ways, but we'll talk a little bit about it when we get to the ironing board.